Nowadays, it seems as if we are living in two different worlds at the same time. The first world being the standards, rules, and expectations we establish for and carry for our homes, cultures, history, and experiences. The second being everything happening in the world outside of our homes and amongst us. Oftentimes, one world creeps into our forces in the hand of the other, where tolerances, liberties, privileges, and beliefs are often tested, tried, and put on full display, and in most cases, shaking the foundation of the other or never truly allowing room for both worlds to coexist. Yes, we're talking about the OG get down or lay down state property style. So in this episode, we tap into the Diaspora, aka the JJC panel, to reveal insights, perspectives, and thoughts on convergence of some of today's most controversial Western ideas with gender and sexuality, discussions with children, corporal punishment, aka beating your kids, interracial relationships, and religion, just to name a few. In today's society, does my house, my rules still apply? Or are we expected to practice acceptance, tolerance, or complacency with the outside world? Welcome to the podcast, everybody. Today's episode is titled, No, 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 Not in My House. We are live. Check out our YouTube channel and IG for video clips at Jerk Jollof Collar Pod. Follow us at Jerk Jollof Collar Pod on IG for more podcast-related content, or send us your questions, feedback, topic suggestions, and thoughts. Interested in joining? Hit us up on jjcpod@gmail.com. Like, share, follow, and leave us a review. Well, guys, for this CP time, I have absolutely nothing. But there's a lot going on in the world. The biggest thing that has happened so far is that lost submarine. So, I've heard multiple things about it. Someone said the controller disconnected and they got lost. Today, they heard some tapping on the hull of it, and they're trying to locate them. What are your thoughts about that?
Shit, I don't mean to, I'm not laughing at because this is being recorded, but I'm not laughing at the submersible being, it's a submersible. But nah, I mean, my CP time nomination right now is D Black's beard, bro. I'm sorry. That shit is it's off fleek. But yo, anyways, though, I'll get back to that
a little bit,
bro. Nah, it's on fleek. Yo, I'm telling you, it's looking it's looking real full. Do the left or right profile real quick, bro. Nah, I've known this man for years, bro, and that connection on the beard has always been a struggle. But it's looking real sexy right now, bro. Congratulations.
Nah, I appreciate the shout out. Thank you.
Young sexy.
Yeah, for real, Mr. No Pimples.
But fine boy, no pimple.
Yes, so.
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff happening with that submersible. Sorry to hijack that, but it's sad. Last I understand, that they used the submersible that was made with off-the-shelf parts, and it also had like an Xbox controller for the controls or something like that, so they could see the Titanic wreckage or something.
And they
like
had a PlayStation controller they messed up already.
Yeah, like a $30 controller, something like that. And it's unfortunate. I hope they get discovered. Last I heard, one of the stepsons, like there's a couple very wealthy people on that submersible, and one of the stepsons apparently went to a concert mid-search or something to see Blink-182, and he got grilled for that. But that was my kid. I'd be like, come on, man, you better be looking for me, fam, for real. But yeah, hopefully they get discovered, bro.
YOLO.
Yeah, before they he's like, I want to see Blink-182 after out of here.
You only live once. Is a dad, you live your life. It's time for me to live mine.
Damn, ice cold.
Ice cold. But that's my bit. Hope they get found. That's all I can say.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy though. Like the part of it that's kind of sad for me is the amount of money they paid just to be on that marine. Like I was like $250K, bro, like just to potentially die. Like it's sad. So I'm hoping and praying that they found them. So but this hour though, I think so how many hours is the oxygen? I think it's like 96 hours or something like that.
Yeah, I'm about to say, you saying
it has 40 hours, I believe.
Is it 40 hours? So it's it's tight, bro.
Yesterday, so,
it's tight. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't look good. I don't know, but just finger crossed, man. I don't know. Miracle happens, I guess. So we'll see.
I mean, I think they paid for an experience and they got the experience, which is it's really jacked up to say, but it's kind of wild. I mean, and it's funny because that same company had an issue with this submarine before. Like it literally had an issue before. It's like, why would you go on this thing? It's and again, I'm not trying to laugh at them, but it's just it is wild. It is a wild decision to hop on this submarine when you already know, hey, like what's the quality check on this, man? Like what regulations are being enforced to make sure this submarine is up to code? What code are we even using to evaluate this submarine? You know, like none of that was being brought into the conversation. So
Yo, I was thinking the same. I was thinking about, I was talking to my wife about that today. I was like, especially if this is the first time they're doing it, like you would think they would have some kind of a backup plan in case something goes wrong. And I'm like, what do they do as a backup? Like just to make sure they, especially going down thousands of feet into the water, into the ocean, man. Like, I don't know, man. It's just scary, man, to even think about.
And I think there was another
this
one.
Compares to like Jurassic Park. When people go to like you go into Jurassic Park and you get hemmed up by by a T-Rex, and you're like, why did T-Rex hem me up, bro?
Right, Velociraptor.
Velociraptor snatch you up, bro. Are you surprised?
Like,
So what they call it? Fuck around and find out.
Getting hemmed up by a T-Rex. The T-Rex arms.
It's like dinosaurs on steroids, like real
yo, bro.
Man, isn't it like fuck around and fuck around and find out, and you just like you find out?
Gen Z dinosaurs.
Oh my gosh.
But there was another submersible that went down before, and I think like in the first hour it had some failure too. But
they found that one.
They found them. Yeah,
but that was the same company. It's the same group.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
So no lessons learned, huh?
No lessons. Nobody
don't go in the depth of the ocean like that, bro. Especially with unqualified, untested, unapproved.
Yeah, man, that's insane. Like they're gonna have to come out with some rules and regulations moving forward next time people do this. So
I was thinking, is somebody gonna get sued for this though? If something bad happens,
I mean, who would you sue? The company?
Yeah, because the guy who owns it was in it too.
Waiver? Right?
I don't know, like the family of I think there was two. Well, I don't know how valid this is, but I heard there was a guy that took his son on board as well. Is that true or false? That's at least one my wife and I were talking about. I don't know, but so if that is the case, though, I would imagine the family of impacted, they might want to sue, right? Just like Kobe Bryant family sued. Somebody got to be responsible, right?
For sure. I mean, you're the one that's supplying the equipment for people to do something that's of interest, so you're essentially held liable. Or once again, if you signed a waiver saying like, well, hey, here are the possibilities, death. You know what I mean? So it's a risk. It's risky business. You would hope and think that you paid so much money, everything will be taken care of, and there will be a backup plan. But here we are. So hopefully they will make it out alive. Our prayers and thoughts are with the families.
Mm-hmm. I hope they got to see the Titanic. I hope they reached it. So
yeah, hopefully they got something out of it.
At least they got to reach the Titanic. Hopefully.
Yeah, so
I don't even know at this point.
It'll be a once in a lifetime experience in many different ways. So,
goddamn, what a way of phrasing it.
Yeah, dude. Like, bruh.
But in good news, Black Mirror is back, season 6 on Netflix. If nobody watches Black Mirror,
that show is fire. So yes.
No, I haven't watched it yet.
Damn.
I guess I added to my list.
Yeah, like fuck Black Mirror. Can you say fuck Black Mirror without saying fuck Black Mirror?
No, I mean I'm not discrediting the show though. I'll add it to my list. I'll add it to my watch list. I get to when I get to it.
I mean, it's a weird show, so just.
Is it scary?
I mean,
I don't remember we talked about this. I don't do scary movies. Remember,
some of them are scary. Some of them
it's not scary.
Episode 2, the Loch one, Loch Ness, whatever. The one that took place in Ireland, that was pretty scary.
I mean, everybody has different definitions of scary. So,
well, I know all y'all like scary movies because we talked about this before. Yeah. What episode is that? Y'all go check that out.
Number 2.
Season 2.
Promotions. We get paid for that.
Episode 2.
Hell no. Doing it for free. All right. Cool. Parenting. We all have our experiences with it. Those going to open it up. pretty much. So I have 4 parenting styles here. And I'm going to read bullet points for each of them. And I want you to think which parenting style you have, right? So we have authoritarian parenting. You believe kids should be seen, not heard. When it comes to rules, you believe it's my way or the highway. You don't take your child's feelings in consideration. That's pretty rough. Authoritative parenting. You put a lot of effort into creating and maintaining a positive relationship with your child. You explain the reasons behind your rules. You set limits, enforce rules, and give consequences, but take your child's feelings into consideration. Permissive parenting. You set rules, but rarely enforce them. You don't give out consequences very often. You think your child will learn best with little interference from you. And there's also uninvolved parenting. You don't ask your child about school or homework. You rarely know where your child is or who they're with. You don't spend much time with your child. So I don't know for you guys when you grew up. I remember watching TV and it was like 10 o'clock and like the commercial will come on like before the news. It's like, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are?
Yeah.
I don't think they do that anymore. So
No.
That's Jamaican dad parenting right there. I got nothing to pin it out. What do you mean?
So taking that in consideration, who knows what type of parent they are or will be?
Man, all of them sounds kind of wild, but I mean, definitely. I mean, the neglective, the
uninvolved.
Yeah, no, it's like it's crazy to even think that like parents do that, like that they neglect their kids. But I know that's the reality of things. It does happen. But I'm definitely an authoritative parent, parenting style for sure. I have a young son, so I haven't obviously got the chance to really explore that. But my son is at a stage where like it's so crazy. Like whenever I take something away from him, he starts crying. And I've been looking at him like, boy, you better stop. It's not my house. Like, you're not going to be one of those kids that start crying because you didn't get what you want. You know what I mean? So I know it starts at a really young age and you have to kind of really jump on it right away. But for me, but the older it gets, obviously, there will be more conversation to why, I'm taking this away from you, why you can't have this, why you can't go to this, why you can't do that. So obviously, that's why I think that is the kind of parents I will be. But I guess it's too early to say, but we'll see.
Do you explain why you take it away, or do you just take it away and that's it? So I'm trying to understand, like.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to him, but he's young, he can't understand what I'm talking about. So obviously, I just tell him like, boy, stop the cap.
I mean,
no, I just don't tell him stop the cap, obviously. But I tell him like, this is not what we're gonna do, right? This is not the house we are. This is not the kind of, behavior that that's gonna fly. You're not gonna cry because something is taken away from you. We'll talk about it why later, but just me. It's really me just talking to myself at this point, right?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, that is at least how I plan to handle him when he start getting a little bit older. And because kids really, when you see a bunch of kids at the store and they start acting up, is because this is where it starts, man. You gotta like tell them right away, like not in this house. You gotta let them know.
I'm telling you, you wouldn't experience it, like legit. Like, so we do the same thing, but I have a little girl, so it's more emotions involved. And I never found a problem. I'll take something away, like when she was around 1.5, it's like she's gonna cry. Like that's all her little mind knows, right? Like, I can't have this, I'm gonna cry. So even when we go out in public, it's the terrorist threes, right? Or three nature. She just throws a fit for no reason. And that's when it happens. So to me, like, it's tough to deal with it in public. But if you're a parent and you see that in public, it's just like, I already know what you're going through, right? It's already tough. No one judges you. They're just going to spaz out. So yeah. I look at it in a sense like you have to let them express that emotion, let them go through it, right? And if you let them go through it, then they get it out. And the tantrum may last for like an hour, hopefully not, or like maybe like 10 minutes or less. And then you just walk through that situation with them. But if you cut it, they're not able to express their emotions. What you're doing is shutting down how they feel. We get it. And like,
I guess one conversation I was having with someone recently is associating like your no with something with a reason, right? If it's like just no, and you just kind of like shake your head or no, like especially at that young age. But like, so like, I guess when I'm talking to myself, I'm just verbalizing it. But I guess something I could do better is, you know, kind of using that example, like actually associating like the reason why I took it away, like no. Or use the word, like somebody was telling me recently, like when they tell their was actually one of my neighbors, like talking to his grandson, like it says no, hot, you know, like, you know, and they associate hot with something negative, like stay away from it, don't go there, right? So yeah, so I think for me, I think, you know, even though I'm having direct conversation with myself, I think maybe that's some improvement I can definitely work on. But yeah, I'll let somebody else go, but that's kind of where I guess my mindset, where my current state is, I would say.
Yeah, sure. I think I agree with you. I mean, because even if your son's not grasping exactly the terminology you're using, you can pick up on your tone. You can pick up on your mood, your mannerisms. So it doesn't have to be explicitly like understanding the exact words that are coming out of your mouth, but you know, the vibe is felt. So for me, I don't know. I think this is such a difficult question because, I mean, I want to say, so I'll say first of all, authoritative, just to answer the question, because that's just the way that I feel like I would run my house. But again, to my cousin's point, I like to give definitions and reasoning behind the decisions that I'm making, not just, you know, say, hey, don't do that, you know. But I do think it's kind of hard because, like, of course, every child grows up differently. And even if you tell a child not to do something or to do something, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that they'll listen. I always just look back at myself when I grew up. The amount of things that I was warned not to do, you know, and I still did it. Don't cross the street. Oh, my God, I almost got hit by a car. You know what I mean? I'm over here dodging traffic. Multiple times. I was bad at that.
You didn't have a leash growing up?
What'd you say?
Your parents didn't put you on a leash?
Nah, they didn't have it. You already know they didn't have leashes when we were younger.
Oh, I had a backpack leash.
Golly. That's
tough. So you used the leash?
That says something about you, Chunky. That says something about you, Chunky.
Yo, actually, I saw that recently and I thought it was wild, but now having a little kid like that's like trying to move around everywhere, I see why, like,
don't do it.
It makes sense to me because I was like,
don't do it.
Will you do it? No.
Don't do it.
Glenn, no.
Don't do it.
Glenn said, nah.
I 100% did it.
You did it?
That was a reflection of me. Like, just gone. And
she's like, get over here.
Especially at like a carnival, though, like at a state fair or something where there's thousands of people and you like, they want to be on the ground and run. That's when I saw it. And I was initially, my mind was like, yo, that's wild. But then now that I have my own like little boy, like, okay, maybe make a little sense. I
might get my own little leash.
I haven't made that decision yet, but
positive control with my child.
But yeah, but anyway, I think it depends on the child. You know what I mean? What my parenting style will kind of be reflected more of them, because if I can give them a directive and they just follow it, you know, but if I have to give more explanations, so be it. But I will say it is kind of scary because, like, I mean, I've been seeing kids just hanging out. Like, I went to play basketball, and then these kids were like 14, 15, and it was late. It's grown men out here, and they out here still balling up. Like, your mama and your dad don't mind you being out here. And I started thinking, like, imagine if my kid was out here. I feel really uncomfortable with that. You know what I mean? So it really depends on the individual, but it's going to depend on, like, the relationship you have with your kid too.
You can track your kid now. It's fine, Mine.
You chip you're gonna chip them too? You got the leash and the chipping?
Listen, I know my child is at all times, right?
Actually, that's a good question. Are you gonna have them share their location? So you obviously you're doing it right now, Chunky, right? So
my child is chipped between her shoulder blades.
You know what? I'm not mad at that either, man. Because
we live in different times, right? So it's not about control, it's about accountability and that free reign, right? So I'm a big proponent of pretty much I want to have positive control of my child, but not be a helicopter parent. So like now, like she goes out and she talks to whomever. Like my child is social just like me. She's like a mayor of whatever like store that she's in. She's like, hey, how are you doing? Hey, what doing? Hey, what's going on? And she just goes out and does her own thing, and I just monitor it and watch the body language of other people. So like even like when she was younger, like when she was around 2, like she'll take off running. Now she doesn't do it too much, and if I ask her to come back, she comes back. So I mean that's just my perspective of it. I'll get into the type of parenting style that I have. Glenn, what type of parenting style do you have?
Yeah, I can only speak hypothetically because I don't have any seeds yet. But speaking from the super
Nah,
uncle
you Uncle
camp,
Dad. Uncle
I'm
Dad.
Uncle Dad, super
Yeah,
uncle.
your uncle to a lot of kids.
I mean, you have a little bit of
Dad.
experience of parenting a child now.
Yeah, from dating single moms and whatnot. But
Yeah, so I mean, your input matters.
That one is a tricky one, but yeah, you have to come in there with the mindset that you are being basically given the spark notes to life and you're going the fast lane. And essentially, it's not just a relationship with that person, but also a relationship with that person's child. And yeah, I can say there is some inkling there, some parenting responsibility to some extent. But I mean, I could speak on the way that what I grew up in, and that was completely authoritarian. I do not know about any Jamaican authoritative. It's either authoritarian. Like it's either one of the two extremes. Like either they're on your ass all day, or they're not there at all. So it's just like, all right, which one do you want? But I kind of feel like, in real life, we just go through the stages of parenting, right? Like you may start off a little bit authoritarian, then become a little bit more authoritative if you're paying attention to what's happening on. And then later on, you'll probably get a little bit more permissive, and then you'll become neglectful because they're grown. Like, what more can you really do for them? I mean, they're still going to be your kids, but I feel like the goal is to essentially get to the point where, all right, y'all doing your own thing. Now it's y'all time to take care of me. You know what I mean? So kind of going through that reverse step. So I think that's essentially the way I would like to do it. I know for me, it's going to be a mix of authoritarian, authoritative, because like, I don't know, like when you guys were mentioning about kids crying and whatnot, the way I look at it as is like, to them, it's a mechanism, right? Because they come into this world, they're completely powerless. What can they really do to get their way, right? Everything's kind of like a power dynamic. So the only power they have is the power to cry and cry and cry until you give into what they want to do. So I don't think it's the making of a bad child. It's just basically there are mechanisms, you know what I mean? And kids are much smarter than we think we are. And that's one of the things I learned, being a super uncle, stepdad, whatever. So yeah, to that point. But other than that, I think it's really going to be a combination. But I think the goal is to be authoritative, but I feel like we're going to experience a little bit of all for hopefully not the neglectful route. But you do see that often, even in dual parent homes where, people feel like they were just given a child and that they didn't have any responsibility in making one. So yeah, but I feel like ultimately it's going to be a combination of the 4 styles. But yeah, it all depends.
Yo, Glenn, I love how you answer that, because I think there's a natural progression that I think that does have to take place, as the kids get older. So I think it'll be interesting. And that's why I was like, I don't know yet, because, each kids might need a different set of hands, man. You might have to put hands on one of them, or you may not have
a different set of hands.
So it's really. And one other thing that you really said that I think is profound, and we should maybe, I don't know if we want to go there, is in relationship with step kids.
Let's talk about it.
If you're in a relationship, what role can you play in that nuclear? Like, can some of this, style of parenting comes into play, or do you have to kind of play from the sideline? I think it's an interesting topic, because I know some friends who are actually dealing with it right now, and it potentially impacts your relationship with your partner as well. So I don't know if you want to go there or not.
For sure. I mean, I don't mind answering for sure, speaking from that experience, but real briefly, succinctly, for me, I feel like you don't enter a single parent relationship if you're not already family oriented. That's the first thing. Like if having a family isn't one of those things on your mind, nonetheless, potentially rearing a child that you had no business in creating, then that's the first thing to think of before you even get into the relationship. Like, don't even date this person. If, like, to me, that's not something to experiment with, because I realized my experience with most of the women in this case, they were ready to take that next step. You know, they date with intention. It's kind of like, all right, whoever I'm bringing, whoever I'm going to see, I'm looking to take the next step with. So if you're just trying to have some fun or whatever, not saying that there aren't some that want to have fun, but the probability of that is very, very low. And if it starts that way, it's definitely going to be progressing to a more mature route. But when it comes to the parenting piece, it's like, for me, it was very much like a watch and learn and get in where you fit in type thing, because initially you kind of navigate the relationship with you and that person, then the child, and then you also have to navigate that person's father, you know, the father in the situation in that equation. And sometimes that can be a very problematic experience, especially when it comes to dealing with the other man, and depending on how old the child is as well. If they're like before their teens, some men are very controlling in that regard, or just want to have a really good say, or kind of want to just exert their position in that. You know what I mean? So now it's kind of like you don't want to step on any toes the entire time you're in that experience. And then also understanding what kind of energy are you getting from that individual. I can say for me, I was lucky enough to where I really didn't get that much static from that person's dad when I was in that relationship from the baby father. But I can't say that's the case for everyone, because I've heard of nightmare situations where the person found out that the mom was dating, and then it was just you had to deal with the dad and all that. And that's why it can always be like a tricky situation. You're always kind of like in this three-way relationship. So it just requires a lot of maturity, a lot of patience, a lot of understanding before you even get to that parenting role. Because then finally it comes with how much time you're actually spending with the child. Does the child even like you? Like, are you guys going to kind of grow into it? So I would say think of all those things before you even jump into it, because it is a lot to unpack, but it's going to vary depending on the situation. But think first and foremost, where do I want to go with this relationship? And then once you can answer that, that will help you determine if it's worth your time and energy.
Yeah, thanks for answering that, because I know there's many men, a lot of guys who are in this situation.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with being, you know, in that. I was lucky enough, the experience was good. Like, my issues with my last relationship wasn't with, you know, the kid or the baby father. It was just me and the person not really coming to an agreement. So then that can happen too. And I think, honestly, ending that situation can also be very tough, because not only are you ending with the person, you're ending with the child as well. You can't have both, you know what I mean? So it's just a lot to consider when you get into that.
Cool. I mean, I guess on the opposite end of the spectrum, when it comes down to it, how would you feel if you had someone else father your child, right? So looking at being a dad yourself, what will go through your head if, like, there's another man involved in my child's life that's pretty much not taking over, but augmenting what I'm doing?
Man, that's a great question. I guess I didn't even, when I asked that question, I didn't even think about it. I didn't put myself in that position. I could see why it is a very tough situation, because as the dad, you want the full control, right? And I think that's probably where the pressure comes into play with the partner as well, right? Because the partner is getting pressure from the dad, but then she, in reverse, she's applying that pressure into her current partner, right? So I could see. So yeah, I mean, ideally, yeah, if I have a kid, and I would want my decisions to be
You
the
do have a
final. I mean, yes, I'm saying if my son, if I don't want to speak that into existence, but
It's so it's not speaking
yeah,
into
if
existence,
that
but it's like,
situation does happen, right? You know, yes, my decision will have to be the final say. But I do understand when you are in a relationship that I have to respect the role that guy plays in his life as well, especially if it's someone that I trust and I feel like he has great value. because I think that's really what it comes down to. If the person that my ex is dating has similar values I do, I think I'll feel more comfortable with him having some say in my kid's life, like, because I know the goal and the vision that we have align, and I think ultimately that's what it comes down to, and I'll be more open-minded to it.
Fair enough. Do you like?
For me, I feel like I don't oversimplify it, but I'm like, it's your house, so you have your rules for your house, but that's my kid, so I have my rules for my kid, and it's gonna be and that dynamic needs to be respected in some form of capacity. Now, I think it's really important before even getting even too deep into that scenario that you do have that transparent conversation, especially how it's going to be extremely awkward. It's going to be awkward until it becomes unawkward. So just be prepared to have it and be transparent on what you expect. That's it.
I have a question though, but isn't like essentially separating from the relationship also somewhat relinquishing control in some regard? Because you got to expect that person's going to move on. They're going to enter a new relationship. And I mean, what happens when you meet someone that's basically probably the same thinking as you, right? Like, well, this is my home. These are my rules. And while she's here and with her child and, with your child in my home, these are my rules. So don't you kind of get to a point where, in a way, you do somewhat relinquish control, because you still have control, but up to a certain extent. Like you can't control what happens outside of your home.
That's the difference. You have control to a certain extent. You don't relinquish control. Yeah. So it's being able to coexist and becoming a parenting style of 3, right? Mm-hmm. So what people forget, it's not about your relationship with your ex or the mother or the new man or woman stepping in. It's all about what you can provide the child to have the best development and growth. A lot of people can't step away and say like, okay, cool. As much as I dislike this situation, we're raising a human being to be the best version of themselves. So what they're going to pick up is the interaction between you, the mother, the stepfather or the stepmother, and how you guys talk, right? So I would never relinquish control, but I would want to have the conversation and say, okay, cool. Like, what activities do you have her in? What are you doing for parenting styles? What are you feeding her? Like, okay, cool. What can I utilize to just adapt my style to make sure there's not a variance when my child comes over my house, right? So just think about it this way. If a child's doing something specific in another house and comes to your house and does something completely different, it's kind of confusing. So there's two different sets of rules. So you want to have as much equality and equitability as possible, so it doesn't put stress and pressure on that child, because the child doesn't know too much besides what's being told. So going back to that level of power that you talked about, Glenn, like, yeah, like children don't have a lot of power, but they do have a lot of emotions. And as you also mentioned, understanding. So we don't give credit to children how much they can absorb information and actually utilize it at various times, right? So like, I say cheese and rice around the house, and my daughter will just randomly like drop some cheese and rice. And it's just like, well, she's paying attention and she's listening, right? So it's all about understanding and cooperation. And that's the best way to get through that situation. To tell a dad or tell a mom, like, relinquish control, that's not going to sit well with them, because that is your child. You are responsible for that being. So I'm not going to give up control. I'm just going to adjust it to best fit the situation.
Gotcha. So I want to give an example. So let's say, okay, you have the third person remarries or whatever. Mm-hmm. Let's say, okay, we live in a meat-free home. So we don't accept any meat eating in this home. And, they say, come back to you and say, you know what? I would like you to not provide her any meat while she's at your home as well. Mm-hmm. Like, what would you do in that situation?
Collaborate, right? I eat meat. Is there a certain type of meat that we can agree on that she can eat, right? So just have the conversation. Like, it's like, I understand no red meat, no chicken, but what about fish? What about something else? So let's sit down and let's talk, and let's be reasonable individuals to come to a point. It doesn't always work that way, but that would be my thought. It's just like, that's extreme, because all I do is eat meat. It's just some way we can collaborate where it's not too much of a difference.
What happens when there is no, I guess, who has the, I mean, ultimately it's going to be, a divide. So when you hit that divide, who has the final say? And I think that's the real question.
The mom, whoever's in the relationship, because I know people who've been in relationships that there's some misalignment on stuff, and they end up breaking up because she chose her kids or her kid over the relationship. So sometimes, that's the consequence that happens in some relationship if you can agree. But I think, Chunky, you said it well. I think that's kind of like where my mind was at, but you just kind of presented it in a very well, it was well said, right? So I think it's really comes down to communication within the nuclear of the people impacted. And if you can agree on it, then, but obviously the conversation will be a lot easier if you guys value aligns, right? So, but if not, then it's tougher.
Yep. 100% agree. Bigger question: how would you feel if if it's a step mom and not a stepdad, that you broke up with your spouse and they date the same gender? Would that bother you at all?
You keep adding all this interesting.
I mean, but
it's not. Well, it does. Well, he or she has the right to date whoever, right? So it's not my place to really judge, but I think it will. I think introduce some really more tougher conversation, I guess, right? Because if you have your value and be like, okay, I don't want my kids to be around that, right? Then it's like it triggers a deeper conversation, and you have to find a way to align somehow. It's a great question though, Chunky.
Yeah, for me, I don't know. I think I don't know. You do whoever you want to do. Like, it doesn't matter to me. But, and that's why I really wanted to make sure that, like, in the very beginning, like, my presence is established. Like, my role in this is established. My position is established. My ideologies that I want to enforce within my child is established. All of those need to be, concrete decisions, and just this is the path moving forward, regardless of whether you have a male, female, non-binary, no partner, become asexual, whatever. Like, these are the rules that I have for my child, and this is what I'm expecting. And that's why, just to go back, and I know we're going to talk about like religion and all these other things, because there are things where we can do our best effort to compromise, but there is no compromise. If I say I'm of this denomination and you say you're of that denomination, what denomination is that child going to be? There is no compromise there, right?
I mean, I think there's a way to work through it, right? So hear me out. As a child, right? So as an adult, you got to figure it the fuck out, right? So once again, take your personal feelings out the situation and realize that this little being doesn't know much about life. You're responsible to show them collaboration. You're responsible to show them acceptance. But if you have a mindset like it's my way or the highway, understand it's going to be received and given back to you. So there's going to be resistance at a point, right? So you're telling your child you have no choice but to do what I tell you to do when I tell you to do it. That limits their amount of freedom, that limits their amount of critical thinking, that limits their amount of being accepted, right? I'm not saying let your child go play basketball at 9:00 at night as a 5-year-old with a whole bunch of grown-ass men. But what I am saying is just that the way we were parented may not be the best way. And with all the information, technology, and experiences that we have, in my personal opinion, I want to develop a mini individual that's far greater than what I am, that's far more comprehensive than what I am. So there are some things that I have to collaborate or concede on, because the most important thing right now is that little human, right? That little human's like, oh, well, at a certain point, why did you give this up? Because I love you, I care about you, and the juice isn't worth the squeeze to prove a point. What the point is proven is that you came back to me to ask me that question, and I'm able to talk to you about it. So we're having open lines of communication at that point. Now your knowledge is expanding. When it comes down to religious denominations, I can't really say much, but there has to be some type of hybrid. If there isn't, create one, right? There isn't, figure it out. You have to create a safe space for your child. And that safe space is not so much protecting them from everything, but giving them the ability to learn, right? You don't want to shut those things down.
Yeah, I agree with you
That's,
on. I mean, I agree with you on the. Obviously, you want the child's mind to develop and for them to come to their own terms and make their own emphasis on the world and define who they are. But I do believe that that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be structure.
So completely agree. There is structure. How you
Okay.
create the structure is dependent upon what you can agree on, collaborate on, and what you choose to compromise on. So if that came off as an I don't agree with structure, that's not it. I completely agree. Children need structure, period. That's just a frame for them to live by. It's what structure you create for them makes the difference.
Okay. And just sorry, last thing is just that because even in the form, you can do your best effort to compromise, to collaborate, but then there's always going to be a sticking point. There, not always, I should say that. There maybe you come to a collaborative agreement, but in the instance that there isn't, I just feel like you shouldn't present it as if there's always an opportunity to somehow meet in the middle when there is no middle. Some things don't have a middle, like.
So like,
And that's it depends on the person. So go ahead.
I think maybe the meat example was too easy. Like, what if you have, and this kind of chimes into the topic as well. Like what are your deal breakers essentially? Like, what are the things that you do not want to compromise on? And that's some of the things you got to consider. Like, what if your partner meets someone same gender or other gender, and he's like, you know what? And they're like, as far as in my home, the child can go by they. Like, we don't do gender assignments here. If he wants to wear a dress to school, he can wear a dress to school in this home. Like, if they want to do whatever they want to do, we use the women's restroom, whatever, of the other gender, that's fine. And I mean, that's something that you don't believe in. Like, how do you reach a compromise on that? If you come from a Catholic home and they're Jewish, you know what I mean? They're like, guess what? Like, as long as they're here, you're practicing Judaism. You know what I mean?
That is
like these are like situations that could arise. Like, how do you collaborate on those things? Essentially,
you structure it, right? So if you're saying that your son is going to wear a dress, and when they're with you, you're wearing pants. Like, all right, cool. Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, you can wear a dress all you want to. Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday, you're wearing pants until they have the opportunity to figure it out. It's just freedom of expression, right? So I honestly believe when it comes down to that clamping down, because at the end of the day, they're going to choose to be the human being they want to be, right? So the man I am today, looking at how I grew up, like I wasn't like this growing up. I eventually evolved and came into my own. What I liked at the age of 10, I don't like at the age of 20. I didn't like at the age of 25, but then went back at the age of 30, right? It's just growth and evolution. So when it comes down to practicing different religions, my standpoint of religions, to me, you have Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, right? They're three Abrahamic religions, and they're exposed to two of the three, right? They get the opportunity to learn more, and there's some crossover somewhere. You're actually, without even noticing, developing a more comprehensive child when it comes down to religion. And when they decide to pick whatever they want to pick, they have more knowledge of it. Their mind and experience is open. So you actually inadvertently created a better situation, and it depends on how you manage it. Is it always going to be perfect? Fuck no, right? There's going to be adversities and challenges, and it's just how you and your partner decide to get through it and what you value the most, either your personal opinion or the growth of your child.
Yeah. I mean, so doesn't that go? I know some parents actually agree with some of the anti-grooming laws that's kind of going around right now, because doesn't that kind of maybe feed into that a little bit too? Right, because if you want to shield your kids away from a particular topic or subject or like life experience, because you want them to not be exposed to it. I mean, I think it's kind of tough, right, to having to deal with that. I mean, I do like your mindset, Chunky, because I think you have this like, I'll figure it out. It is what it is attitude, which is great, right? I think it makes problem solving in any kind of situation easy to deal with, right? Because you have that mindset. But in reality, that's not how easy a lot of people deal with stuff, right? So
no, I agree.
It's just I think it's just tough, right? So, but I do love this topic. I think I'm glad that we kind of deviate a little bit and kind of touch on some of this topic, because this is some of the meat of it, because people are living through this. And it is something that because I have a friend who personally that I know is dealing with something very close to this right now, and I just found out, and I know, so
Yeah, and I think like to touch on that also, and this was like kind of the basis for the topic as well, as far as the original vision. And it's like, you know, I've heard from a lot of parents that I work with as well, and it's a pressing concern as far as like how these grooming law goes and whatnot, and the idea that essentially you are releasing somewhat of a control over what your child's able to learn or understand once they leave your home. So it's kind of like now having to have those conversations at home whenever they learn something else from school or they learn something else from their peers, and you as a parent not essentially having a say. And I think that's kind of the theme, especially in the case in Florida, where it's just like parents wanting to have a say or understanding of what's actually in these curriculums. What are their children learning? What their children even see on television, you don't have control over a lot of the times. It's just like what they see on their tablets, you don't have control over. And you could put parental guides on. And every once in a while, I've seen some YouTube videos on my niece's tablet. I'm just like, yo, what are you watching? Like, what is this? So it's just like, to me, it is kind of on that verge of the conversation of, you know, how much control do you really have as a parent? How much say do you have? And, you know, what conversations are you willing to have or not have? Like, how do you put the timing on, this is when I want my child to understand this about gender or sexuality or whatnot. I don't want them to be force-fed, you know, something from the curriculum, and you may not have an understanding of who's teaching it or what background do they come from. So it's even more than just, you know, your partner leaves and now they have another dual parent home situation, or the three-way parenting, the co-parenting. It's also the institutions. What are they pressing? The education system, what are they pressing? The people that your kids essentially are around, what are other parents understanding? I mean, you got some people that can't even agree on what their kids should wear or what their kids should eat, let alone, you know, what should they be studying or what religion should they follow. Yeah. So I think it's a tough situation.
Let it happen. So like, I'm trying to understand grooming, right? So I don't have an issue with my daughter learning about different sexualities, right? At a point, is either I know about it or I don't know about it. If I know about it, I still have more control to discuss it than her learning from a friend when she's not comfortable talking to me.
Yeah.
So understanding is, it's like, yeah, we do have control of what's being taught in schools, right? I don't have an issue. I think we talked about this like a while ago, like Blue's Clues Incorporated teaching about like, you know, the Pride Month, right? I think that's necessary because it's a huge thing across America. There are parades, there are people that live that life. Am I going to take my daughter to a drag show? Am I going to take my daughter to a male review? No, there's limits, right? But when it comes down to learning about things that are opposite from them, they're going to deal with someone like that. They may be 5th grade and little Tommy wants to be, you know, Tamara. And how is my daughter going to interact with that without being taught or have an understanding of it? Just because you learn about something doesn't mean you're going to become it. It just makes you more aware about it. There are ways to teach and pass on information that doesn't transform people. Just because they're living in a household where there's 2 moms and 2 dads doesn't mean they're going to start dating, you know, the same sex. They can live in a house with a mom and a dad and still decide to date the same sex. They will come into their own, but that freedom of understanding and appreciation to me is super important, the way I look at my childhood and what was accepted and what wasn't accepted. And how did you feel when you weren't accepted, when you said certain things? And those things at the end of the day weren't wrong. It's just your expression. Now they're controlling and mitigating that expression. Yeah, it's just like, okay, cool. Like you're trying to understand how you feel. Let's walk through it. Well, your mind can't process that because you're not old enough. So yes, there are frames, there are the structure, and there are limits. And you said it very well, Glenn, like you will start transitioning your parenting style as they get older. And when you start transitioning and gravitating towards a different parenting style, they'll start to learn and come into their own. But if you protect your child from everything, they'll learn nothing. So they have to experience, and you have to be there to guide them. You are their Sherpa through life.
And that's where, and I think that, you know, I think this conversation is just further exemplifying the complexity of this topic, because we originally talked about structure, but then also the other side of that is having the ability to the freedom to express oneself and even make their own inferences of the world. Those are, I mean, those two terms, those two subject matters are not even black and white. They're completely gray. And it is completely tied to an individual's ideology, not even a collective group. I mean, we can be on the panel and we can sit here and maybe we agree on one particular point on how we want on one particular asset, one particular facet about how a child should be raised, and someone could have a completely different perspective and prioritization on it. So therefore, there is no catch-all. It really is going to always depend on you. You know, I mean, even in, you know, we're talking about denominations. If you're looking at it as, you know, a book of work or some books of work that allow you to have a better understanding of some, like, history or things of that nature, or if you are actively pursuing this as your faith, you will evaluate them differently. And the way you feel about it will be differently. And the way you reflect that upon your child will also be different, you know? So I think for if there was anything I would want to leave our listeners with, is just really have that conversation. And even though we presented different scenarios, you know, step parents, there's multifamily households and things of that nature, but really, really don't shy away from those conversations, because if you value, you know, the development of your child, you ultimately value the sanctity and the safety of your child, you know, it's on you to really have that true conversation with whoever is involved in raising your child. Because and that means teachers too, that means your daycare, that means your next door neighbor if they're watching your kid, babysitter, you know, Ray from down the street, you know, watching the kid for 5 minutes. You gotta be, at least this is what I think, this is what I believe, this is what I think is best for your child. Again, it's not, and I don't think it's selfish. It's like, this is what I think is best for my child. You know, let's have a conversation about it.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with the understanding that these are things that they can't avoid, but I do feel like there should be a certain age where they're exposed to it, and not necessarily Blue Clues may not be the best outlet for it, in my opinion. But I mean it's inevitable. Yeah, they're going to experience it, but I think parents should essentially have some control over when that conversation takes place. And is it really a conversation to be had at 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old? You know what I mean? Like, some of these kids can't even wipe their butt properly right now. So it's kind of just like, no, to me, it's just like a maturity thing. Yeah, some people may think otherwise, but I think there is a certain age where that conversation should take place. And, you know, that could be one of those conversations you have with those teachers, right? Like, yo, listen, you know, in my home, I understand this is what the curriculum wants, but what do you do when you get to that situation where your teacher says something different and you're like, well, you know, you're going to pull that child off that school? So I know it's a tough question to answer, but I think it should be a certain time, and the parents should have more of a say.
Unpack that. You say a lot of valid things, right? So to unpack it, it's just like, how do you see what the right time is, right? So from your opinion, from your standpoint, and it's not to be argumentative, but to really
absolutely
have our listeners get your mindset, in the sense that you have a firm belief that at this stage of adolescence, you're going to learn about, you know, the birds and the bees, right? Or at this stage of being a kid, you're going to learn about what a boy is or what a girl is, whatever that means. So just explain your frame when it comes down to that.
Yeah. So my frame, whenever that conversation regarding sexuality takes place, as far as reproduction, things of that nature, typically around that stage, then I think that's can be an outlet to where you can kind of explain, okay, yeah, there are other people that are interested in people of the same sex, and there are heterosexuals, there are homosexuals. So in my opinion, I think that conversation doesn't really happen until when, like 8th grade, 9th grade, something around that age, 7th grade, around that extent. So that's, in my opinion, where it could kind of be coupled in with that conversation. But anything before that, you look at your average Blues Clues listener or watcher, what are they? 3 years old, 2 years old, 1, 2, 3, 4. To me, that's too soon, in my opinion.
No, fair enough. I mean, that's diversity, right? So that's what helped people grow, if you can actually have the conversation and not argue about it. So like, I have a different belief watching it. I felt nothing. The way they were teaching about pride was more so like, it was educational. It wasn't like, oh, okay, well, this is a drag queen, lift up her dress, this is what she has. It's just like, hey, there are people out in the world that are different from you. This is why they're different. Oh, you may see someone with hair and earrings, but they may be a boy. And that's okay. Accept them for who they are and don't pressure them to say, like, hey, you're a boy, you need to act like a boy. So I think that's
that's a man, honey.
I mean, I don't tell people what they are, right? And that's the thing, is it's like, I think
ain't no boy, that's a man.
That belief, in a sense of, we have to tell people how to live their lives. It's just saying that I'm not accepting of whoever you are in my life.
And no one's saying that. Absolutely.
I mean, what you're saying, like, if going back to your example, if there
I didn't say nobody can be dragged. I just said I think there's a certain age where kids should learn about that.
No, so like, you go back to your example, say, oh, that's a man. Like, they don't identify as a man. They identify as a woman or whatever case may be. Like I said, like, there are little boys and girls that are going to school that prefer to be called something else, right?
Well, I mean, some drags aren't even homosexual either, or some of them still prefer to be referred to as their actual gender. It can be a wide array. We assume that they are, but they necessarily.
So I want to be like clear. So like, I want to keep in a frame as children, right? So like, we were talking about the age of Blue's Clues, that 1 to 4 window. So if a 4-year-old boy decides to come to school in a dress in high heels, which isn't something abnormal, because way back in the 1800s, men were wearing high heels, boys were wearing high heels, boys were wearing dresses at a point in fashion. So this isn't something that's far off. But
this wasn't considered a dress, though.
Yeah,
right. But we consider it a dress today.
Yeah.
So like, how do we as parents respond to that, and how do we teach our children to respond to that? And I think that's the important thing.
That's
it's just like, if they decide to like, fuck that, you're a boy, okay, cool, that's how you feel, but hey, like, have a pocket of acceptance for that, right? Because at some point, here's the bigger question: how would you feel if your sons came out the closet to you? He was like, Dad, I like boys, I'm gonna wear a dress, and you're gonna call me by this female name?
I feel like, me personally, I'd say when you're 18 or you can do on your own, feel free to do whatever you please. But as far as you're under my home, like, I have these expectations for you, and just to protect you, because it's the same when you have parents that allow their kids to get chemical castrations under the age of 18. They allow their kids to take hormone pills to allow them to become more effeminate. So there's a lot of dangers. There's some kids that are even able to go call a doctor, get some pills, and not even have a parent around, or not even be told the dangers of what you're taking. So, I mean, there's another underbelly to this as well, to where it's not even just the parents failing these kids, but it's also some of the institutions that we have in place, some of the other things that are also happening, to where it's just like, personally, you have some people that are in it, allies for the sake of making money off of the movement. So it is a big topic, I would say. But me personally, to answer that question, I feel like, okay, yeah, that's fine when you're old enough to understand. Me personally, I wouldn't allow my child to undergo those processes if they're not a fully grown consenting adult. That's me being a parent and protecting them from themselves at that moment, or some of these influences, the same as I wouldn't allow my child to go out and drink, the same as I wouldn't allow my child to go out and smoke alcohol under a certain age. I feel like this is also one of those topics where I'd have to put my foot down as a parent and just express to them that, hey, these are the expectations that I have. That you can feel how you feel right now. When you're of age, you can do on your own, fine. And I think my only responsibility then as a parent is to accept and love them. Would I be disappointed? Yes, I would. Because me personally, yes, I would have a certain vision where I want to extend the bloodline, extend my family in a traditional matter. As we all see, tradition is changing. So you can only have the standards for your home. And all these things do have an inference or impact on how you're raised. Like, I grew up in an authoritarian home, and yeah, there's some flaws to it, but I got a lot of my understandings and beliefs from growing up in that home where parents were present. They had a say, they laid the foundation. So it's just like, yeah, I learned some things on my own, but it always went back to, what did my parents instill in me, or what are the expectations they have in me? So it always went back to that. So yeah, you can go out and experience some things, but for the most part, it's like, you got to give your child a path to follow in the first place. Otherwise, there's just so many influences that they can undertake and undergo. Like, which direction will they go? They'll be in that situation where they're just, all right, you know what? I'm just going to go here. I'm going to go there. I'm going to go here. No, I'm going to keep it simple for you. These are the cheat codes: up, down, left, right, square, triangle, circle. This is what you need to do. And from there, here's where you go. You know what I mean? That's my take on that, at least.
Diversity, right? So there's a drawback giving them cheat codes and them not learning themselves. There's a drawback to anything that you do. So yes, you have a very valid point. The way that you're raised is more like the way you're going to raise your children.
And you learn from it too, and you learn the flaws of it as well.
And that's it. I agree with you that at the age of 18, my daughter can make her decision. If she wants to be a junior, then that's fine. Like, okay, let's walk through this together, right? Let's just talk about this together. Are you going to change your sex right now? No, because I'll wait till you're 18 to make that decision. You don't know what you're doing, but I accept you. I don't think I'll ever be disappointed in my child if they decide to change their gender or do something different. I'll be disappointed if they decide to like do something they knew better than to do, right? Like, oh, okay, I'm going to do 150 on the freeway and like smoke weed and drink and just do this shit. Like, that's where I'm disappointed. But other than that, there's not much, much child can do.
Yeah, like I think I said before, like even in your Blue's Clues, even as we kind of talked about Blue's Clues, and you were talking about, that you'd be okay, that you were okay with the episode being aired, you still kind of somewhat described some limitations. Like there is a point that they could go technically too far.
Yeah.
And then within that being said, and this is just to highlight the difference within the individual, because someone else may say, no, I don't think that's too far either. I think that's fine. Or I don't think that's enough. Or, so I don't know. I think it is a very complicated topic. I will say that what makes it more complicated is because we operate in this society where everyone goes to school within a collective group. Everybody goes to high school together, or we all go to the same company to work, or we all live in the same community. It's not that we live in this isolated ecosystem of just our immediate house. We have to step outside and we have to interact with the world. And because of that, we will have conflicting ideas. I know I've heard, we can just raise your kid at home, make them stay at home. They got to step outside at some point. They got to go outside. They got to meet the world. So do you want them unprepared and everything's new, just hitting them or do you want them, just in the deep end, fully absorbing it all and seeing what kind of person they come out at the end? Is there a happy medium in there?
Yeah. I think there's also a lot of fear there as well, because
nowadays fear drives it, definitely.
To have an opposite opinion of anything usually could result in you getting doxxed, losing your job, losing your security, losing your welfare. So even to have a platform like this and speak your opinion, it's just like, you know what, you are better off being gray than saying how you really feel, because of fear that you may end up losing what you have, or because you didn't align with what the general consensus is or what they want you to believe, you're at risk. And to me, that's the crazy part, where we want to teach tolerance and acceptance, but it only works one way, and I feel like that's really not fair. Like, you can't get understanding if you're expected to believe just one thing. You know what I mean? So I think there's some work that needs to be done there. But I mean, with the fight for acceptance, it wasn't ever like, okay, give us our rights, or that's it. And like, I think everyone wants everyone to have their rights, but it's just like when it comes to the children, is a little bit of a stickier situation there, and making sure that people are equipped to have these conversations, because it pervades even more than just gender, even the race topic. And, hopefully with the next episode, we can talk about that as well. But I think it's just, we're not there yet as a society. I think there's still work that needs to be done to get it to where it's equitable as far as everybody having a voice, no matter what their opinion or view is.
Yeah. So I guess one thing we can all agree on is there's not a perfect answer, right? Yeah. There's not one answer. So we can all just learn from one another, have those open and honest conversation, And I think it gets even as more complexity when you have disagreement in the household, right? Let's say you and your spouse don't have the same value on the way the kids should be raised, right? So this conversation goes deep and deep. So, but one thing I do appreciate is the very openness that Chunky has towards this topic. I think, you know, like I said earlier, makes this type of navigating this topic easier for the kids, right? Because the kids feel like they have freedom to make decisions for themselves, right? And the same thing for, I mean, I was raised the same way you were raised, Glenn, right? We listen. We don't speak until you are spoken to, right? So there's a level of respect that comes in the African or Jamaican household that I think definitely impacts the way I carry myself. And I obviously, you know, we've talked about, you know, even some of this stuff about like our parents not saying I love you, you know, they struggle with that, right? So, but we also know that they show love in a different way. It doesn't mean they don't love us, right? But it just means they show it in a different way. So, but ultimately, man, it's a great topic, y'all. You know, I think we can keep going on this conversation, but yeah, just ultimately just be open to have this conversation within your nuclear. Yeah.
For sure. And I laugh because it's funny when D-Black and I talk about it, he was like, I'm the most white Black person you ever met, because like how y'all talk about like the way you were raised in the sense of your household. D-Black used to look at me all types of sideways. I'm like, Grandma, what the fuck?
Yep.
I mean, I'm African, bro. Yo, like, what'd you say to Grandma?
Before you finish that word, you're already getting smack in your lip. So.
I already knew it's coming down the fight. I was like, I'm gonna establish dominance now. D-Black like, yo, you need to go over there and like fix it.
You
but
better go apologize to Grandma right now.
Yeah, that was just the dynamic.
Yo, literally, I would go apologize on this man's behalf. Grandma, he ain't meaning no better.
It wasn't that bad, but like I would raise my voice for two reasons. One, I was frustrated, and two, my grandma could barely hear the stuff I was saying to her.
That's true.
I would tell her in her face, and she would just look at me. And D-Black was standing right there, and like she would not understand anything that I'm saying. Huh? And then I would yell it, and she still wouldn't understand. Then I would raise my voice. She's like, "Why are you yelling at me? Because you can't hear me." So I would say, I had a different upbringing. I bounced around to different homes, and like, yeah, the upbringing that I had was more accepting. But Fran hit it on the nose, hit it on the head. He actually just closed this out. I just had a funny thought in my head, had to get it out. But nonetheless, for more content or to learn more about the podcast, feel free to check us out at Jerk Jaw of Color Pod on Instagram. Stay tuned for the outro. There are additional ways to reach out to us. I appreciate y'all being here. Once again, be sure to like, share, follow, give it to your friends, and leave us a review on your preferred streaming platform of choice. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. I think this deserves a part 2. There was a lot of good input from Glenn, especially. Fran, you were quiet most of the time, so part 2, you're going to talk for 30 minutes straight.
What? I feel like, man, I was in there, bro. Stop it. I mean, you guys were saying a lot. I had to be quiet, man. You know, you gotta want to be quiet.
Before we adjourn, though, can we give it up for D-Black's beard, though? That shit is looking real spicy.
Indeed.
Congratulations, D-Black.
I made it.
And don't forget the lips too. My man, lips shining.
Nah, Fran, you still have the shiniest lips out of everybody. You can't.
No, oh my
God. Pass that choice.
Can we just give the props to my cousin?
Yo,
thank you very much. Thank you
for the
very
beard.
much.
Shiny lips goes to Fran. Fran wins the shiny lips contest. Always number 1. Glenn wins the beanies of all times. Always with a beanie.
Brimless caps. Absolutely.
Bruh. All right. I think that's it. Peace.
Peace.